back to one of our top stories, and that is Ukraine, of course. The country needs a bailout, and very soon.
Yes, indeed. There was a warning earlier this week that the country needed €5 billion by the end of this week to be able to avoid running out of cash, in fact. Now, the International Monetary Fund says it's ready to step in with emergency funding, but of course Ukraine needs to make an official request to make that happen, and to do so it needs to have a government in place, another hurdle for it to overcome. Now, there had been some speculation over what part Russia might play in that plan. We now know, according to a finance ministry official who's spoken to the RIA news agency, that Russia will take part in those discussions at the IMF. They said they won't stand aside, and that can be for a whole variety of reasons, one of which is that Russia's banking sector is very carefully linked to the Ukraine. They have huge exposure, total estimated to be about $28 billion, according to the ratings agency Fitch. The three banks, the Vneshchakonom Bank, Gazprom Bank and VTB, all have significant amounts of their investments. You can see up to 29% for VEB there associated with Ukrainian investments. That can really cause problems for them. If there's economic consequences in Ukraine, they could have a huge knock-on effect in Russia. And
we'll talk, of course, about this financial crisis in Ukraine with Florence Vimino in the newspapers in a moment. But first, let's talk about the latest woes at the Australian national airline.
Yeah, Qantas is to cut another 5,000 jobs after announcing underlying losses of $225 million for the second half of 2013. Now, the figure compares to a profit of almost $200 million in the same period in 2012. Those job cuts amount to almost 1/6 of the airline's workforce and are part of a massive cost-cutting plan at the airline. Now, Qantas has been suffering from increased international competition in recent years and has called on the government to relax the strict rules around capital investment in the airline to allow it to shore up its finances. The airline is to sell or delay the delivery of some 50 aircraft, but the CEO says there are more tough times ahead.
This performance by our airlines is unacceptable, and the current position is unsustainable. It reflects a substantial change in our circumstances.
Now, it's interesting to contrast that position with Air New Zealand, not too far away from that part of the world. There reported record half-year profits of around $116 million, up 40% on the previous year. Now, Air New Zealand actually owns almost a quarter of Qantas's main rival, Virgin Australia, and the company says it expects to benefit from increased growth in that business on domestic airline routes in Australia, really showing that competition problem that Qantas is facing.
Right, so how has all this affected Qantas's share price?
As you can imagine, investors not too impressed. That latest news, Qantas's share price down some 9% in Sydney today. That's having a knock-on effect on the Australian markets. The S&P ASX 200 down by almost 0.5%. Japan also trading in the red. You can see the Nikkei there down 0.3%. Slightly brighter picture in China, though. The Shanghai Composite and the Hang Seng both back in the green. This after the central bank decided to allow the currency to appreciate after a week-long losing streak. Investors there watching closely for any decisions that will come out of the legislative phase beginning next week in China.
Here in France next, where unemployment has hit another record high.
Yeah, the number of people out of work increased again in January to 3.3 million. These monthly figures represent the number of people signed on for unemployment benefit. It was up 8,900, as you can see in that graphic there. The most reliable quarterly unemployment figures are due out next week, so we'll have a more broader picture from those. But part of the problem the French economy has is that it's just not creating enough jobs because the economy isn't growing fast enough. That doesn't look set to change anytime soon. The European Commission says the French economy is set to grow by just 1% this year. Now, the government had promised to reverse the trend of rising unemployment. Of course, they missed that target. Let's listen to the reaction of the French Prime Minister to these latest figures.
We still have to persevere without letting up in our effort to bring about a lasting fall in unemployment in our country. We're not there yet, even though there are encouraging vectors of growth.
Mission Impossible for Boeing. And now we're going to talk about Mission Impossible for Boeing.
Yes, an aircraft maker perhaps not known for its phones, but it's created a phone that can delete all its call and message data if someone tries to tamper with it. The project was actually being developed in secret, but a regulatory filing in the United States reveals the details of the black phone. Boeing's targeting security-conscious users, particularly those from government agencies. The phone is encased with special sort of tamper-proof cover, which if messed with, or if tampered with, I suppose, it will force the phone to automatically delete the data on it. It certainly sounds a bit like Mission Impossible, but Boeing does actually have a track record in this area. It already provides the communication services to Air Force One.
And that wraps up the business news. Thank you very much. That was Stephen Carroll. And it's time now for the France 24 special series on farming. As you know, France's biggest agriculture fair is taking place this week, and every day we take a look at key issues that affect the industry.